wage a relentless war, to the last drop of blood, against anyone who dares to attack our states.
Burkina Faso used to collect 3% royalties on gold mined by foreign companies. They followed the usual rule of exporting raw materials and importing finished goods. But everything changed when Captain Ibrahim Traoré came to power. Traoré did not just seize power in 2022, he seized control of an entire economic narrative that had been written by foreign hands for far too long. But this story is different from every other African resource tale you have heard. The real shock is not the money itself, it is who is controlling it now. Before we continue, hit that like button to help us beat the YouTube algorithm. The transformation began the moment Traoré asked one simple question that no previous leader dared to ask. Why are foreign companies walking away with the lion's share of profits from our own soil? The answer to that question has reshaped an entire economy and sent a strong message to the international mining boardrooms from London to Toronto. Gold mining in Burkina Faso was not born yesterday. The precious metal has been pulled from this West African soil for years, creating wealth that somehow never seemed to trickle down to the Burkinabe people. International mining giants had carved up the landscape like a birthday cake, each claiming their slice while local communities watched trucks loaded with gold dust disappear toward distant ports. The old system worked beautifully for everyone except Burkina Faso. Mining companies enjoyed favorable contracts, minimal government interference, and profit margins that would make oil executives jealous. Meanwhile, the country that owned the gold remained among the world's poorest, with most of its population surviving on less than $2 a day. But Traoré's 2022 coup was not just about political change, it was about economic revolution. The young captain looked at a system where foreign companies extracted over 60 tons of gold annually, while Burkina Faso remained dependent on international aid, and he decided that the math did not add up. The first sign that things were different came with the establishment of SOPAMIBI, Société de Participation Minière du Burkina. Initially, it looked like just another government agency with fancy letterheads and empty promises. Instead, it turned out to be Burkina Faso's Declaration of Economic Independence, a state-owned mining company designed to put national interests first. What followed was swift and decisive. The 5 major mining assets transferred to state control included operations previously run by major international players like Endeavour Mining and Lilium. Companies that had spent years negotiating favorable terms suddenly found themselves face-to-face with a government that was not interested in playing by the old rules. It became clear that Burkina Faso's gold would now serve Burkina Faso's people. The nationalization process of the mines was not a chaotic grab for power, but a calculated chess move that caught international mining companies completely off guard. Overall, the nationalization process included renegotiating contracts with foreign entities and ensuring greater control over mining operations, which directly affected several international mining companies, such as B2 Gold and Endeavour Mining. Burkina Faso told the multinational corporations worth billions that the game had changed. No more sweetheart deals. No more extracting wealth while leaving communities impoverished. No more treating Burkina Faso like a colonial outpost where resources flow in only one direction, outward. The international business community watched in horror and fascination as Traoré's government systematically took control of mining operations. Share prices of affected companies tumbled as investors realized that it was an economic warfare with real consequences. The old contracts had been negotiated when African governments were weak, desperate for foreign investment, and willing to accept almost any terms. These deals often locked countries into receiving royalties of just 3 to 5%, while foreign companies kept the majority of profits. But Traoré's approach was different. Instead of begging for investment crumbs, his government demanded partnership on equal terms. Foreign companies could still operate, but not as colonial overlords extracting wealth while contributing minimal value to local development. The results have been nothing short of impressive. Burkina Faso has raked in a staggering $18 billion in gold revenue since 2022. It is more money than many entire African countries generate in total export revenue over several years. So that you can understand it properly, Burkina Faso's entire GDP before Traoré took power was around $18 billion annually. But in just over 2 years, gold revenue alone has matched what the entire economy used to produce in a full year. This represents a fundamental shift in how African resources are controlled and distributed. The money is not theoretical, but real cash flowing into government coffers, funding development projects, and creating economic opportunities that simply did not exist under the previous system. The transformation becomes even more remarkable when you consider the challenges Burkina Faso faces. This is a nation dealing with terrorism, political instability, and a harsh Sahel climate that makes agricultural production difficult. Yet somehow, in the midst of all these challenges, Traoré's government has managed to generate more gold revenue in 2 years than most African countries see in a decade. The secret is not better mining technology or discovering new deposits. It is more about keeping more of the value chain within national borders. Instead of selling raw gold at international commodity prices and watching foreign companies add value through refining and marketing, Burkina Faso is positioning itself to capture more of the profit at every stage. This approach challenges the entire colonial economic model that still dominates much of Africa. Raw materials flow out, finished products flow in, and African countries remain permanent junior partners in global value chains. Traoré's gold strategy breaks this cycle by insisting that Burkina Faso become a player, not just a supplier. The international mining industry operates like a sophisticated club where the rules favor established players and newcomers are barely tolerated. Companies like B2 Gold and Endeavour Mining have spent decades perfecting the art of extracting maximum profit while minimizing local obligations. They arrived in Burkina Faso, expecting to find another compliant government willing to accept whatever terms were offered, but they found Ibrahim Traoré instead. The confrontation between Burkina Faso's government and international mining companies has always been intense. Although Burkina Faso had legal authority, popular support, and control over the actual gold deposits, the mining companies had lawyers, international pressure, and decades of experience in African resource extraction. It should have been no contest. But Traoré's government had something the companies could not buy or negotiate away: sovereignty. When you own the land, control the government, and have popular support, even the most powerful multinational corporation becomes just another foreign business seeking permission to operate. The nationalization process revealed just how one-sided previous mining agreements had been. Burkina Faso has nationalized 2 gold mines for a sum of around $80 million, ending a legal row between rival companies Endeavour and Lilium Mining. The fact that the government could step in and resolve disputes between foreign companies by simply taking control demonstrates the shift in power dynamics. The most underreported aspect of Burkina Faso's gold success is not the money, but the technology transfer that foreign companies never wanted to happen. International mining firms built their business model on a simple premise that African countries provide the labor and land, but the real technical knowledge stays overseas. Equipment maintenance contracts, geological surveys, processing technology, and mine planning all remained under foreign control, creating permanent dependency. Sopamib broke that model by reverse engineering expertise that was never meant to be shared. When foreign companies pulled out, they took their technical staff but left behind operational mines that still needed to function. Instead of collapsing, Burkina Faso's mining operations adapted by developing internal capabilities that international firms had claimed were impossible without foreign oversight. The breakthrough came through partnerships with unexpected sources. While Western mining companies insisted their proprietary technology could not be replicated, engineers from China, Russia, and even local technical colleges proved otherwise. Open-source mining software, alternative equipment suppliers, and collaborative technical training created pathways around the technology monopolies that had kept African countries dependent. Within 18 months, Sopamib had trained Burkinabe engineers to handle geological assessments that used to require expensive foreign consultants. Local technicians learned to maintain and repair equipment that foreign companies claimed could only be serviced by their specialists. Mine planning software that cost hundreds of thousands in licensing fees was replaced with alternatives that delivered comparable results at a fraction of the price. International investors initially reacted with predictable outrage. Stock prices fell, legal threats were made, and diplomatic pressure was applied. But Burkina Faso's economy kept growing. The predictions of economic collapse and investor flight simply did not materialize. Instead, the success of Burkina Faso's approach has inspired other African governments to reconsider their own resource deals. When one small nation can generate $18 billion in gold revenue by taking control of its own resources, it raises uncomfortable questions about why other countries are still operating under colonial-era extraction models. Mali, Niger, and other Sahel nations have taken note. If Burkina Faso can transform its mining sector and generate massive revenue increases in just 2 years, why can't they? The old excuses about needing foreign expertise and capital are losing credibility when faced with concrete evidence that African governments can successfully manage their own resources. But the effects extend beyond just mining. When a government demonstrates it can successfully challenge international business interests and win, it changes the entire dynamic of foreign investment negotiations. Other sectors, telecommunications, banking, agriculture, suddenly find African governments less willing to accept unfavorable terms. The transformation also challenges international development models that emphasize foreign aid and investment over local control and capacity building. Why does a country need development assistance when it can generate billions by properly managing its own resources? Of course, not every African country has Burkina Faso's gold deposits, and not every leader has Traoré's willingness to confront international business interests. But the example demonstrates that alternatives to dependency exist, and that African nations do not have to accept permanent junior partner status in the global economy. The $18 billion gold revenue is impressive, but what happens next determines whether this represents genuine transformation or just a temporary windfall. Smart resource management is not just about generating revenue. It is about converting natural wealth into sustainable economic development. Traoré's government faces the classic resource curse challenge of turning mineral wealth into lasting prosperity. History is littered with resource-rich African countries that generated massive revenues from oil, diamonds, or gold, only to see the money disappear without creating lasting development. However, the early signs from Burkina Faso suggest a different approach. Instead of treating gold revenue as a government national cake fund, there is evidence of systematic investment in infrastructure, education, and economic diversification. The goal is to use the gold revenues to build an economy that can thrive even when the mines are eventually exhausted. This long-term thinking represents the most radical departure from previous African resource management. Too often, African governments have treated natural resources like lottery winnings, something to be spent quickly rather than invested wisely. The focus on immediate consumption rather than capacity building has left many resource-rich African countries poorer in the long run. Burkina Faso's approach emphasizes using gold revenues to develop human capital, build physical infrastructure, and create economic alternatives. The idea is that today's gold wealth should fund tomorrow's sustainable economy, not just finance current consumption. The mining sector itself is being developed with an eye toward maximizing local value addition. Instead of simply digging up gold and shipping it overseas for processing, there is growing emphasis on developing domestic refining capacity, jewelry manufacturing, and other downstream industries that capture more value within national borders. The $18 billion gold revenue has given Burkina Faso economic leverage it never had before. Countries with money have options. They can now choose their partners, set their own terms, and pursue their own interests rather than simply accommodating foreign demands. This economic independence has military and diplomatic implications that extend far beyond mining. A government that controls its own resources can fund its own security forces, pursue its own foreign policy objectives, and resist external pressure more effectively than one dependent on foreign aid and investment. The $18 billion figure is not just about gold, but possibility. It represents what African countries can achieve when they prioritize their own interests, control their own resources, and refuse to accept unfavorable terms from foreign partners. The success story is not finished. $18 billion in gold revenue over 2 years represents an impressive start. But sustainable transformation requires building on this foundation rather than just celebrating current achievements. The real test will be whether Burkina Faso can maintain production levels while developing domestic capacity, whether the government can invest gold revenues wisely rather than waste them on corruption or consumption, and whether the country can build a diversified economy that doesn't depend entirely on mineral extraction. International pressure will likely intensify as other countries consider following Burkina Faso's example. The international mining industry, Western governments, and international financial institutions all have strong interests in maintaining the old system of African resource extraction. They won't give up without a fight. But the $18 billion precedent has been set. Other African governments now know that alternatives exist, that they don't have to accept colonial-era resource deals, and that controlling your own natural wealth can generate prosperity rather than poverty. The young captain who seized power in 2022 has achieved something many thought impossible. He has demonstrated that a small African country can successfully challenge international business interests and win. The gold in the Sahel sun is not just mineral wealth. It is proof that African independence and African prosperity can go hand in hand. Time will tell whether Burkina Faso's success represents the beginning of a continent-wide transformation or remains an isolated example. But one thing is certain: $18 billion in gold revenue has changed the conversation about African resources forever. The question now isn't whether African countries can control their own wealth. Burkina Faso has proven they can. The question is whether other African leaders will have the courage to follow suit. The gold revolution in Burkina Faso isn't just about money. It's about dignity, sovereignty, and the right of African nations to benefit from their own natural wealth. $18 billion is just the beginning. By taking control of its mines, the country is challenging a system that has kept its wealth out of reach for too long. But with big moves come big risks. Can Traoré and his team turn gold into lasting change? Will the people see the benefits, or will the challenges prove too much? Is Burkina Faso's nationalization a blueprint for others, or a risky gamble? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this insightful video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. We have more stories coming that will change how you see Africa and the world at large.